At 91.3 FM, this is WWUH West Hartford, a community service of the University of Hartford. I'm Mark Shannon, and as we continue with our artist on the hour for today, Phil Kelly, we're going to take a break from his music and talk with a man right now. And on the line with me from his home in Washington State is composer, arranger, and now recording artist, Mr. Phil Kelly. Good morning, Phil, and welcome to Thursday Morning Jazz.
Well, thank you, Mark. Welcome. Nice to be here. I'm ready to answer anything that I can, any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time here today. And you've got two great recordings now out on Origin, Convergence Zone and My Museum. And you have two different bands that are playing on here. And I guess each one of the bands gets their name from some weather associated with that area out there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, the reason for that, besides the fact that I wanted to have a presence in L.A., because since what festival work there is for big bands is basically in the L.A. area. And besides, I always wanted to do a recording of music that wasn't for money in L.A. with the really good guys. So the original thing, the Northwest Prevailing Winds, it was all centered around the weather gag. So to keep the distinction between the two, I decided to come up with the Southwest Santa Ana Winds for the L.A. group. And there is some turnover or same personnel on both. So there is a link between the two bands. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that there literally were two separate organizations, but that were still sort of tied together.
Well, you're doing North and South versus Scott Whitfield, who's got his East and West thing.
A turnaround on the Scott Whitfield East-West thing.
Exactly.
I think Pat Williams did that for a while, too.
Yeah, I think he did, too, as a matter of fact. Yeah, had two different bands going. Well, with Origin Arts, that's a label that is gaining some momentum here with the artists that are on board with that, and you've chosen it. How do you like being on Origin Arts?
I like Origin because it's a small label, but it's big enough that he's got a pretty good roster of stations that are used to the product. They really have very high standards for the product they put out, and they have a complete turnkey thing, and with a very good album designers, and you just turn your master over, and a real nice looking album comes out at the other end. Plus, they have, like I said, they have a real good in now with a reputation with jazz programmers all over the United States. And so, that your record's going to get into the hands of at least 600 station and program directors when you put one out. And I've noticed, they're very fair. There's, you can always talk to John anytime you want to call him. And it's just a really good little label, and they've picked up some really big artists in the last 2 or 3 years. In addition, I'm not counting me, but I know that Kim Richmond put an album out on Origin. Chris, what's his name? Chris Walden has got an album out.
He's got two of them now. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course there's mine, and there's another great L.A. or Seattle band named Jim. I knew it. When you get old, it'll come back to me in a minute. Jim. Oh, hell. Well, anyway, when I think of it, I'll blurt it out.
Yeah, all right. We'll press on here.
Jim Knapp.
Jim Knapp's band. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think they've got an album on Origin, too. Okay.
Well, with the personnel you've mentioned here, you have a couple of core players, as you mentioned, that play in both bands. Bill Ramsey is one of them, and Pete Chrislieb's another.
Yeah, and Andy Martin.
Yeah, those three guys.
A phenomenal trumpet player from Seattle named Jay Thomas.
Who, he does some beautiful solo lines on both recordings.
Jay is an interesting case. He's sort of like an Ira Sullivan. He plays equally well on trumpet or all the reeds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, except on my stuff, he normally just sticks with the trumpet and flugelhorn stuff. But he's just as fluent on reed playing.
And I guess on the second recording, it took you, about 6 months to be able to get all the personnel together in the same room?
Yeah, because I got a hold of Wayne Bergeron out in L.A., and I said, I really like the sound of the bands that and that you put together. And John LaBarbera said, no, we'll call him up. His wife will get a band together, and she's a contractor. I said, great. So I contacted him, last year sometime. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. But it took 6 months to get everybody in the room at once.
Yeah.
Because between running around the country, doing, like college concerts and things like that, and the recording, what's left of it in L.A., everybody was busy. So it took, finally after 6 months, we managed to get a quorum together in May and went at it.
Well, one of the things that I wrote down here in my notes was, here you've been writing music for decades. What's taken you so long to come up with some big band recordings?
Well, making a living got in the way of it for a long period of time. Of course, like when I was a kid, I started out, writing for big bands because that was what you did in the 50s. And I wrote for some stuff on the road for when I was did some road band work for about 5 years out of college. And I worked for a lot of singers in the early 60s, and I did a lot of writing for them. But then I went into, about 64, I sort of went into a studio and never came out in daylight again for about, 30 or 40 years, and that was definitely non-jazz writing.
Mm.
It was a little bit of everything, but it didn't really fall into the category of anything that wouldn't make money. So I ended up writing a lot of, jingles, film scores, you name it, just anything that people would use or pay for. Oh, industrial shows were another big staple for a long period of time.
Well, I've been saying here as we've been listening to your music off these recordings that whether you know it or not, you probably heard Phil Kelly's music on TV with these different jingles that you've done for Chevrolet and Cadillac and Volkswagen. And
well, that's true, and various ones of the national ones that I did. And again, most of these you have to backdate to the 70s and 80s because, I retired in the 90s. But I did the Six Flags things. I did American Airlines, Zales Jewelers, let's see, Delta Airlines. Boy, I should have brought down my old resume. But I did them for, just tons of jingles. The same time, back in the 70s, is when the car makers were still doing these big, elaborate model rollout shows. And I got into that for about 7, 8 years, and that filled up every summer. You'd pick up 1 or 2 auto shows. And they were done, some of them were done like little elaborate semi-Broadway shows, one-act Broadway shows that they spent a lot of money on.
Mm.
And you'd go off to a place like Miami Beach or Las Vegas or someplace, and they'd bring all their dealers in and show them the new car, So
did they give the jingle guy a car?
No, that didn't happen. I didn't get a discount. And, although I did drive a Cadillac for a few years, but they didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
No, but that's basically what happened is that I just did a little bit of everything, and very little of it really was of a jazz context. Like I always tell people when I do seminars at college stuff, you've never heard anything till these last 2 albums, but you heard me and you don't know it.
Yeah, right. Well, with these 2 recordings, you are also a drummer. You're not playing on the recordings either.
No, I've got a pretty bad case of arthritis. It started creeping in the 70s, so I kind of phased out of playing about 72. But I put in a good 30 years of professional playing, too. And there's so many good young drummers that came along and were much more familiar with the modern styles that I wasn't brought up with, so I used them.
Sure.
Like, why get in your own way? If there's a better guy to do it, I always hired them.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about Convergence Zone. This came out on Origin a few years ago now. Mm-hmm. And you got 10 tunes on there that really kind of display some different directions that you go in with, some contemporary things that really kick very nicely. And, of course, you got some very clever song titles on there as well, too.
That's one of my failings, is I must be funny. I'm going to find some way to be sort of strangely humorous with the title, because I just have fun doing that.
Well, somebody picks up that Convergence Zone, and the title they're going to read, their song title is Damp Brown Places.
Well, and as soon as you hear it, it's Camptown Races.
Yeah, that's right. But it's
sort of like the old English rhyming slang thing. You ever heard a Cockney guy in England, they have a series of words that mean something else?
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of what happens to my brain when I start writing these titles.
Yeah, there's some crazy titles on there. Besides Damp Round Places, we got Pleading Dim Cap.
That's well, that has more sense in it than you think. It's a legal term for pleading insanity. But I just had this one tune there, which is one of my favorites actually on that second album is that one, and it's because it's all based on diminished scales. You know, like the very familiar diminished scale that practically every jazz improviser uses at one time or another. It's part of the basic jazz idiom, and so I wrote this tune to see if I could do a tune that's based largely on nothing but material off that scale, and that's what that is.
Well, it's some great blowing too, but like I say, you got things going in a number of different directions. You got some very hip stuff. In fact, you on the contemporary sounding things, the rhythm section actually comes out of Nashville, I guess. Is that it?
That's true. It's actually on I think cut 2 and cut 10 of Convergence Zone. I have a friend of mine in Nashville named Pat Coyle, who is an excellent piano keyboard player. And I've known him and worked in studios with him for like 20 years. And he used to live in Dallas and in L.A. And when he moved to L.A., he did all my contracting out there. So he's decided to take his family and move to Nashville for a better environment, which it is. And he still works all the time there. The drummer on both of those cuts is a guy named Paul Lime, who's probably made more money than everybody in the room, because he's been a hit maker in L.A. and mostly in Nashville for the last 20-some years. And we kind of broke him in the studio when he was 17, so I've known him since he was 17 years old. And he's a killer little drummer. And the other guys are guys that Pat found in Nashville. With the exception of the bass player on cut 10, I sent the Pro Tools file to a friend of mine in Dallas, who's probably one of the better thumb pop rhythm and blues bass players I've ever run into, a guy named Gerald Stockton. So this particular track went from Nashville to Dallas and then back to me in Bellingham, and I took it down to Tacoma and we put the horns on it. Both that and the second one, Cousin Bubba Loves You.
Yeah, those are some hip charts, that's for sure.
Well, I like that really is, I've done more writing in that style for commercial reasons in the last 20 years than any straight-ahead jazz stuff. Because, I've done a lot of sports background music, like for ABC Sports, ESPN, the NFL library, and all the stuff that I did tended to fall into that power, blood, sweat, and tears, dreams kind of thing, like a funky rhythm section with horn. And so, like, as far as jazz, that's what I wrote for 30 years that replaced jazz, was that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And, and I enjoy that stuff, like it's part of my background, so naturally I wanted to show some of it off.
Well, maybe one of the ones that's been recorded the most, or the one that's been recorded the most, is Sweet Georgia Brown, Upside Down.
Well, yeah, actually the actual real title, and please make sure it goes in on your station log, is Sweet Georgia Upside Down. Because I had a big fight with ASCAP a few years ago and discovered that like a whole pile of my royalties were going to the guys who wrote Sweet Georgia Brown.
Oh, no kidding.
And I said, no, you don't understand. It's based on the chords, but it's a totally different melody. And I have a copyright on it. So we had a little bit of a fight because it had been recorded so many times and even listed on labels wrong. So, but anyway, yes, that has been covered by more people than anything else. I think there are probably about 10 or 12 covers of that thing out. Yeah,
I could only think of two, but before we went on air today, you'd mentioned about 10 or 12 bands.
Yeah, like there's a University of Iowa recorded it. I know that UNT recorded it at least once, maybe twice. And there's some foreign recordings of it, one by Putt Wickman, which is the Swedish Radio Orchestra, or Stockholm Radio Orchestra. And I think there's two or three other colleges. I know Iowa and University of Illinois recorded it. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah, a lot of people like that arrangement, that's for sure. This is Thursday Morning Jazz. I'm Mark Shannon. We're on the phone today with Phil Kelly, composer and arranger who now makes his home in Washington State. I guess you'd spent, 40 years between L.A. and Dallas? Was that it?
That's the bulk of it. Yeah, I lived a little bit in New York in the 60s when I was doing road work, but I settled down. Most of my studio activity was in L.A. and in Dallas.
And so you've moved to, the Northwest, how many years ago now?
I've been up here about 8 years now.
About 8 years. And I guess it was back in the probably the mid-'90s or so that your wife, Kathy, had developed cancer. And,
that's right. And that was sort of the last straw that said, hey, let's get out of here and go someplace we like. Because we both were kind of bummed out living around in Dallas due to the heat, just the crowding, and also the fact that the commercial work had kind of dried up pretty much, and the younger guys were doing it because there's a definite half-life of a composer in the commercial business. If you're not 30 or close to it, they don't trust you. So along with many other guys that were into their 50s and stuff at that point, I wasn't getting the work. I was getting work. Most of my work consisted of fixing stuff that the kids could do.
Mm-hmm.
They would do a synthesizer track and say, we have to put real strings on it, and we don't know how.
Right.
So I'd go in and do it, and it was kind of demeaning. And so finally I got to the point where I was really bummed out with it. And when the cancer incident happened, we said, you're right, let's pull it up and go someplace we enjoy. And that's how we ended up here.
Well, on Convergence Zone, you have a selection that's dedicated to her memory. It's Kathy's Waltz. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, like a couple other things, I, over a period of years, have written so many films. Every once in a while, I'll come up with a part of a tune that like a theme that I really like, and I'd earmark it and stick it in an envelope. I've still got the file, and I had a half of the tune written because it was a film cue. And as a matter of fact, it was accompanying the birth of a Arabian horse, little Arabian horse. And it was all shot in slow-mo, and it was a very pretty scene. And so the first half of the tune had been written for that film. And I then finished it out and wrote a bridge and a back end, and there it is. It was originally a film cue. Another one that was originally a film cue is off the second one, My Museum, that was originally a flugelhorn solo accompanying a night scene, an aerial night scene of Houston. And the first half of that was a film cue. And then I wrote a back end to it and got a hold of Marissa Dodge, who is a wonderful lyricist, and she managed to come up with the lyrics to My Museum, and that's where that one came from.
A lot of the 19 selections that you have on both these recordings, that's the only vocal that you have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Greta Matassa?
Yeah, Greta's, isn't she something?
Yeah, she's the singer on that one.
Well, I think Greta is the best, or if not the best, one of the very best singers in the Northwest. She's a real unknown treasure up here. And she's got her own, several of her own CDs out, and she is a killer singer. She can sing, and that was really only one facet of her singing.
Really?
Yeah, she can stomp with everybody and just do about anything.
Boy, she does a remarkable job on it.
Several of her own CDs out, and she is a killer singer. She can sing, and that was really only one facet of her singing.
Really?
Yeah, she can stomp with everybody and just do about anything.
Boy, she does a remarkable job on it.
Well, I know that. Well, one reason I put the vocals in is I wanted to do it, and I could, so I did. and again, it's the idea of keeping everybody off base. I try to do something on each one that uses another something I've done, but it's not like what was before. I'm now scratching my head thinking about what I want to do next time that will also be something they don't expect.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're talking about next time, because with My Museum, there's 9 selections on here, and I guess as the storyline goes, you brought about 15 arrangements with you to potentially put on this recording, so I would imagine you got at least another file drawer full of arrangements to lay down.
The reason I took them down, and I knew, is that if we had any problems or any misgivings about anything, I'd have something else handy we could throw out there. Because I knew that even with great players like we had in L.A., you don't want to go. I'm too old to show off. I don't go in there and put stuff out in front of them and see how great I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to be too much trouble, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
You got so much time, and experience tells me just about how far you can push something. And I did have one cut I wanted to record, and Wayne and I looked at it, and he said, if we'd had a rehearsal, or if you wanted to budget an extra half hour of overtime, he says we could probably do this, but otherwise I wouldn't try this one. And it was a funk cut. It was sort of an atonal Schoenberg funk cut, sort of like a Brecker Brothers kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
He said we could do this, but it would take more time. I said, don't, never mind. Here, just let's do this instead. And that's where, as a matter of fact, the substitute chart was my body and soul.
Okay.
Because I knew they could play that down in 2 takes.
Sure.
They did.
Sure. Well, on My Museum now, the final selection on here is Zip Code 2005.
Right.
And this is kind of a follow-up to something you'd done decades ago with Bill Watrous.
Yeah, it's the same tune rewritten. It's the only time in my life I've ever gone back into an arrangement and reworked it. Because I'm usually like throw the paper over the shoulder, and once it's done, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't look back. But that one, I decided when I started fooling, because everybody wanted to hear a new recording of it, since I'd recorded Sweet Georgia on the first one. And it's suffered with some of the same problems, and it's that everybody recorded it too fast. Like you can't play that thing that fast. So I wanted to get it at the right tempo. So once I started fooling with it, I got into it, and I said, gee, why did I use that voicing there? I think I'll just, change that. And then I'd get a little further and say, I think I'll change this too. And before I knew it, I'd spent about 3 days on it. And it literally came out. It's got a different ending on it. There's some interior things that are different. If you played both of them side by side, you'd be able to tell what they are. But this, I think it's an improvement. Or I wouldn't have done it. And it's got a whole new ending on it. And again, some great solo playing. Boy, those guys were all over that thing.
Well, that's something we're doing here this morning. Is we're going to play those side by side, not simultaneously, but
no, of course not. But I can tell you to look out for the back end. The back end on the new one has been extended quite a bit, and if you really want to listen, the interior of the sax lines and the shout chorus at the end are different.
All right, so the musical ears
to look for.
Musical ears will be tuning in on that one for sure. Now, your website, philkellymusic.com, will give us all of the background here, some of which you've even forgotten about.
That's true, yeah. Like I said, my CV is there because I don't remember all of it.
But there's also some information there about being able to pick up your charts. If somebody wants to, whether it's a band director who's listening today or somebody who's got their own big band.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's one of my primary ways of funding these recordings is the sale of the records or the sale of the CDs, plus getting as many of the charts into colleges and bands around the country, and all that comes through Walrus Music.
And
there's this walrusmusic.com. It's pretty well known. It's a pretty good band publishing company.
Sure. Now, most of your orchestrations for 4 trumpets, 4 bones, 5 saxes, and 4 rhythm section, or is it?
Yeah, it's pretty much what you call your standard big band.
Okay, so folks, if you're out there listening today, check out philkellymusic.com, and right there on the print music page, you'll find a link to Walrus Music that will lead you right there to being able to get his arrangements. And you also do custom arrangements, is that right? If somebody
sure. Anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'll be glad to do. For money, I kind of restrict myself now to things that I said that would be fun. Because I don't, like if somebody calls up and says, here, I want another arrangement of, feelings, I wouldn't do it, I just don't do that kind of thing anymore.
Right.
But I have in the last 2 or 3 years, like I did an album with Terry Gibbs on Mack Avenue Records. It was a string album where he did a bunch of bebop tunes with a string section. It's really kind of strange, and I wrote about a third of that. And I just finished up a project with Stix Hooper, formerly of, the Crusaders,
mm-hmm.
Kind of an R&B project. And that hasn't been released yet. He hasn't found a label for it. But I do those kind of things, and I'll do an occasional chart or something for a good singer or something like that. And, that kind of stuff, I'll do it, but again, it has to be fun, right, because that's the whole point of it now for me.
You have a section on your website, too. It's called Ask Phil.
You know something? Nobody ever has.
Really? Well, maybe we can get some people to ask you some questions.
Nobody has ever asked anything in that thing, and I can't figure out why, because I get a lot of questions off of other jazz bulletin boards. Like personal. You get the personal message from something, and I've gotten probably over a few years, probably 60 or 70 people asking me a question, which I'll answer, if I can.
Mm-hmm.
But the little box on my website, nobody's ever bothered to. I don't even know if it works. I've never gotten anything from it.
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you kind of lay out what it is you're looking to have people, ask you about?
Anybody like students that have technical questions about arranging or stuff like that was pretty much what my intention was. Like to answer any. I don't do homework questions. Don't ask me how to harmonize a Bach chorale or anything like that. But if you're writing a chart and you have a place where you're in a bind on it, I'll try to help you out of it.
Sure. Okay. Well, that sounds good, folks. So check that out too. You can ask Phil questions. That's not Dr. Phil, right?
No, it's not Dr. Phil, and I don't answer those kind of questions.
My Museum and Convergence Zone, the two recordings that are available on the Origin record label, the music of Phil Kelly, 19 terrific arrangements, folks, that you want to make sure you have in your library. And the Santa Ana Winds are made up of some great players, including Pete Chrislebe and Bill Ramsey, we mentioned earlier today, Andy Martin.
Those guys are stables. They're in both bands.
Yeah, but then you got Lanny Morgan and Wayne Bergeron, who you mentioned, and Grant Geisman and so forth.
And Bob Summers, the guy that used to be with Maynard, great jazz trumpet player.
Yeah, so you're gonna get work on both ends of the West Coast there.
That's my point. Is I think that I'm hoping to get some festival work done in California with the LA band, and I did a couple things this past summer up here with the Northwest band, which is about the only place big bands work anymore.
Right. Well, you and Kevin Seeley are up there, right?
Yeah, Kevin's he's got the Emerald City band. There's another guy named Jim Cutler that's got a pretty good band up here, and and like I said, Jim Knapp, of course. Yeah,
well, Jim Cutler, in fact, he just came out with another recording there. That's on Pony Boy, I think. Yeah, sounds real nice.
It's pretty good. Yeah, and the thing that's nice about Jim Cutler's album is that he's had that band in there every Sunday night for about a year, so they played together a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas they may not personnel-wise be all first-string guys, once they play the music that many times, it sounds great.
Yeah.
I've got the album. It's great.
Well, with My Museum, you have a dedication on here as well. This time it's to Frank Mantooth and Sammy Nestico.
Yeah, both of them, friends of mine.
We lost Frank, I guess about 3 years ago now.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 years.
Yep. But,
he was, it was one of those things you don't see coming.
Yeah.
Because he was about my age, about maybe 2-3 years younger. I don't know how old he was for sure, but I know that he was in the same general age range as I am.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Sammy, he's still cooking away out there at 80-some years old.
Yep. He's doing terrific. In fact, he just did a recording with the Falconeers Jazz Ensemble, and it sounds great. Sounds great. Well, anyway, Phil, thank you so much for being here on Thursday Morning Jazz. Do you have any final comments as we close up?
No, it's just that I'm having fun with music again after 40 years of doing it for money, and I recommend everybody, that if you can, please listen to it, buy the record so I can do another one. Stop me, help me to strike again, as it were.
Well, I hope we can do that, and I hope we're generating some interest today to have folks check out your website, maybe ask you a question or two, and by all means check out Convergence Zone and My Museum, because they are great recordings.
Well, thank you, Mark.
It's been nice to have you here, Phil, and we'll look forward to your next recording, and maybe we'll have you back again.
Okay, well, I'm shooting for trying to do that as a 207 now. If I'm lucky, maybe by sometime next year, I might have enough money in the kitty to do it again.
Terrific. Well, we'll look forward to having that and come out, and like I say, perhaps we'll have you come back again.
Okay, great.
Phil Kelly, thank you so much for being with us on Thursday Morning Jazz.
Thank